All right, welcome back everyone to I think this is episode 7 of Jesus on a John Boat. And man, I'm excited because I have Corey Johnson here. Well, Corey, we'll explain what this means, but give us your first name. That's a beautiful name. I don't want to butcher it, so I want you to be able to say this name. Tell the people.
Fair, fair. A lot of people have, so I respect the caution that you entered into it with. It's pronounced Noriaklu. It's a Palauan name. It was given to me by my sponsor mom when I was out there. It means taking a step ahead. And she gave it to me after my fourth or my fifth year in Palau when I was leaving to come back home. It was very fitting. It was from there that I came here to the seminary where we would eventually meet. And I feel like that name it's been something I'm trying to live up to, consistently trying to take a step ahead in everything that I'm doing. So that's kind of the history of it. Noriakla, it's an interesting one.
Well, I love the name, but I'm still for a while. I'm gonna still stick with Corey for now. But it's beautiful. I definitely wanted you to share that and share that beautiful aspect of your journey. But before that, I just want to say, guys, Corey is like one of the most inspirational people. He's a missionary. He's mission at heart. He's a gymnastics guru. He's a leader. He's a person. I would put you in pastor, right? Because you did seminary, right? So you're pastor.
I guess you could say that.
You're pastoring and just an overall amazing friend and just an inspiration on social media and a lot of the cool things hopefully you're gonna talk about on the pod. But just overall an amazing friend and actually someone who I look up to and admire. A lot of the conversations that we had throughout the summer helped me prepare and just feel empowered to even do this project. So I just want to thank you, Corey, for being willing to be on here. I know you're a busy man. Guys, this guy flies back and forth through the country. He's doing amazing things. Some might call you even the buff missionary. I don't know if that name still lands. This guy's fit. He's doing amazing things. So, and he loves the Lord. He loves Jesus. And so him and I relate in so many deep ways. You and I relate in so many deep ways. So yeah, I just want to welcome you. Thank you for being here. And before you begin, we get into the deep stuff. Let's, I guess, just tell people what is life like for Corey right now. But before you explain that, I always like to reiterate like what the pod's about. And it kind of helps you prepare for what you're going to talk about later. But just think about what's Corey up to right now. But I'll just say really quick before we begin, guys, remember if this is your first time watching the pod, John Boat is about Jesus being the extra to our ordinary, meaning that he is always with us. He is always doing powerful things and he wants to live in the ordinary spaces. So when the big, amazing places happen, it's just a byproduct of what he's already doing in our ordinary lives. The other thing that I always like to leave, the other big catchphrase is the same way he was in the disciples' boat, he is in our boat as well. Those weren't just stories from the past. Our stories are happening today. And like the Bible is real for us. They're coming to life out of the page and we're experiencing our own stories. So that's a little bit about what the pod is generally about for those who are just joining in and supporting today. This might be their first episode. I don't know, friends or family of Corey, who knows when we post this, what new people we might bring on. So yeah, just always like to explain the general concept. But yeah, so Corey, get us set in on what's your life look like right now? What is it all about? What are you up to these days?
All right. Well, I guess first off, I want to thank you for inviting me onto the pod. And I want to give you a shout out for being 7 episodes deep. Like, it's legit. And it's been really fun having those conversations with you and seeing you get to this point, seeing what you're doing on social media and out here impacting people. I love it. I love it. It's so intentional. It's so focused. And it's an inspiration to me, too. My podcast, I haven't been as consistent with it, but I'm like, yo, man, if I'm out here inspiring other people, I gotta hold my end of the bargain, too. So we gonna bring it back. We gonna bring it back.
Thank you, brother.
But for sure, for sure. Life for me now, I'm working at a tech company. I was working at Andrews University. I was a dean there for a number of years. During the same time that I was there working on my MDiv, I'm currently working on my doctorate now, about halfway through. Just turned in a nice little critical book review yesterday. So I'm down to my last 3 assignments to do for year 2. And then we go on to year 3. What a journey. What a journey. I'm assistant coaching for the gymnastics team at Andrews, the Gymnics. We just had Acrofest a couple weekends ago down in Texas, Tuau. It was a grand time, except for spending like 40 hours on the bus. That was not fun, but it was a great experience, a good time with the team, which is probably one of my main areas of, I'd say, participation in ministry now. Um, and I'm also working towards something more long term. And because of that, even though I never really liked being called a pastor, I am kind of helping and assisting with pastoral duties. It's still hard for me to stay. It's hard for me to stay. I'm assisting with pastoral duties with AU Genesis, which is one of the campus churches, and I'm working with one of my friends to try to figure out how I can assist him best. Thorley James out with the Calvin Center Church, and I forget the name of the other church that he's working with as well, but Calvin Center Church is the one that I'll be assisting him with once I can get all of my stuff figured out.
That's
So there's
all.
a lot going on. There's a lot going on.
That's amazing, guys. He's a busy man. But the biggest thing about that it always inspires me is your passion. You're a passionate person and a very driven person. Not just like excitement for excitement's sake. It's very like intentional, very like Corey's like when he's doing something, when he puts his mind to something, he is getting it done and inspiring people along the way. There's some people who get things done, but they're a little like rough around the edges sometimes. They're a little bit like, I'm so focused. I'm not a people person. But you're also very just passionate about empowering other people along the way. And if your story can help someone else's story, and that's where you and I always click and we always mesh, because anytime like I could literally just be like, oh, Corey's here. We're at like a lunch or we're at a something. I'm like, oh, I know I'm gonna have a great conversation today. I know I'm gonna get inspired today. So in that way, like it's cool that you're even without a full-time pastoring gig, you're pastoring as you're shepherding, you're loving the flock, and no matter where you'll step into a space and just love on people as Christ did, and that to me is what this pod is all about. It's what I want to keep doing in my ministry. So yeah, man. I guess the first thing, well, let's tap in. I always like to see like we met through. I think I applied. I think that's how I first met you, right? Like I applied to work for under you as a thing. I didn't get the job, but that's okay. It worked out. I ended up just becoming good friends with you guys over time, all the different deans. Man, like yeah, you guys are amazing, and it was awesome. I ended up getting a job for one of the other deans, his wife, and I'm still at that job today. So a blessing in disguise in different ways. If God doesn't have you in one space, He has you in another. But guys, that's just to let you know, even if you have, this is an inspiration to everybody. Even if you have rejection in employment, you can still make beautiful connections and friends along the way. So I thank you for that you still befriended me. It was just like, hey man, like just because that didn't work out, it doesn't mean we can't be super cool. And so yeah, I just want to say, I guess that's my connection point. Do you have a connection point? If you remember when we were first meeting, or like when you first?
Yeah, I was thinking about that as well. And I think on that note, it's funny how God works out, because I don't think that we ever had a bad candidate for those positions that we were there. But for some people who were there, it, how do I say it? Where you ended up was the most sustainable place for you. And it's interesting because out of all the other people who ended up going through that cycle there, I don't know if any of them are there anymore. And they're
Yeah,
all good friends of mine. But
yeah,
it's like, because you ended up in that place, you have a lot more sustainability. And the other guys are doing different things, and we still hang and we're cool and all of that. But I'm glad that you were able to find sustainability in something like that. Because like I said, I'm not even in that position anymore. So it wasn't sustainable for me. So what you were able to gain, it's like, I think it was really God's blessing to give you what you needed to be able to stick with that. Because this is like a few years now that you've been working with Rachel over there.
yeah,
And I love that you've been able to have that sustainability as you're still going through school. So to
yeah,
me, that's a win. That's a win.
yeah. Yeah, I would say, yeah, but then just leading up to after that, it's just powerful, dude. That like, I just say that's the kind of people that we strive to be, even if we don't always get to say yes to people, even if that says a lot about, I only mentioned that because I think it says a lot about your character. I think it says a lot of things overall at large. that, most people, man, if you, and especially in the secular space, I don't know what people are watching this or who's watching this, but yeah, sometimes when you get like a space where it's a no, you're like, man, I'm done. I'm not talking to these people no more. But that just shows I was like, no, these guys are great. Like some things just don't always go the way you try for one season, but it's powerful. So I say that only to mention like that's how cool that we ended up being. Just cool either way. It's just awesome, and I didn't take it any way. I only took it as, hey, that's not what God has for me today. It's not my face, but I received from you guys a love and said, hey, we're still here to support your journey. We're still here to be with you and befriend you and love on you. So for those who are bosses watching the pod, those who are managers, leaders, guys, even in a different space, even if you're confronting someone or something, you can still do things with grace and walking in love. And that's a powerful trait to have. So yeah, I guess after that, we just had mutual friends as well, and we continued.
Mm-hmm.
But so I just wanted to get those connection points. But let's start with the first question. So the extra to your ordinary, what does that look like for you? What is you're involved with many things, but what is that one thing? What is that area for you that's just, man, like God is just doing something powerful, but to some people it's just an ordinary thing, but to you it's like your day-to-day mission and goal?
Yeah, if I had to pick one, like right now, it probably would be, we mentioned gymnastics. That's one thing that a lot of people look at kind of maybe skeptically, um, to where it's like, okay, yeah, you're doing all this kind of stuff, and some more conservative people may even have their own issues with it because of what we do and how we interact between male and female and all that kind of stuff. It's obviously a physical sport. You're catching people and trying to protect people and all of that. But most people, maybe that's a generalization, but a lot of people don't look at it as a ministry. And it really is. There have been a number of opportunities where we've been performing that people come up and ask us, hey, that was really cool what you guys did. Like, where are you from? And we get a chance to share where we're from. We're from Andrews University. It's an Adventist school up in Southwest Michigan. We've had the opportunity to perform at halftime shows for NBA games. And we have people who ask us, and we're able to build connections there. I think one of the coolest things to illustrate this to me was a couple weeks ago at Acrofest. Acrofest is like the largest gathering of gymnastics in the United States, and it's an Adventist thing, which is really cool. It rotates through the different universities that have the programs, and at Southwestern Adventist University, they do it a little bit different, because instead of just having clinicians come in and teach the team for the whole weekend experience, they have one day where we're kind of working together in collaboration, and then on the Friday, we actually go out and perform in groups at the different public schools and local schools.
That's cool.
Now, it's legit, because I wasn't expecting it, and I'd never been there for an Acrofest before, so I didn't know what it was going to be like. But whenever we go into a public school kind of a space with the climate that we have right now, it's like, well, how direct can we be with the mission side of things and talk about Jesus? We have a particular routine. We call it Tribute to God routine, where we go through creation all the way down to the crucifixion, and we're illustrating this through gymnastics moves. And it's a really cool thing, but it's like, we're in a public school space. Can we actually show this? And we decided not to in this case. I think they would have actually enjoyed it, though. There was one routine where their music was explicitly Christian. I don't remember who the artist was or what most of the words were, but there was one phrase that kept on repeating itself through the song. Jesus is coming soon. Jesus is coming soon. Jesus is coming soon.
Wow.
And it doesn't get more direct than that.
Wow.
And at the end of their routine, they had a sign, Jesus is coming soon, and they did like a chant in the middle, Jesus is coming soon, Jesus is coming soon. And the entire school joined in the chant with them. And I was like, yo, I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking about it again, because it's like, you never know who's going to resonate with what you're doing. Yeah. And it's like, gymnastics just got us in the door, but the message that we were able to share by being there in that space, they got something. And for as many different cool moves that they were cheering to watch us do between the 4 or 5 teams that were there. That was the time where you felt like one pulse and one voice in that gym was when they were doing that chant. And it was absolutely incredible, totally unexpected. But it's like, man, you just never know.
Yep.
And so when I think about that concept, the extra to my ordinary, and for y'all out there listening too, it's like you have no idea the thing that you're passionate about could just put you in a space to open a door to share something about Jesus, whether it's by example or whether it's by a chant or something like super direct. You never know. So hopefully I'm not getting ahead of anything here, but it's like, I do want to say on that point, like, you don't always have to, I guess something that it felt like growing up was if you wanted to be in ministry, you had to be a pastor, and that was the only way to do it. And it's like, no, I think the original model and what we see in the scripture actually encourages us that you could be a good fisherman and be a missionary. You could be a tent maker and be a good missionary. There's a lot. You could be a shepherd and be a missionary. There were all different kinds of things you could do and still be able to share Jesus. You didn't have to be a pastor to do it. And I think that really opens the door to anybody who's out there and whatever it is that you're passionate about. I'm passionate about Legos. That might open a door for me to share Jesus someday. I don't know.
Yep.
But yeah.
No, that is powerful. And to me, and I've watched the thing. What's ours here at Andrews? What's our end of the year program?
Home show.
Yeah. So at home show, my wife loves watching it. Like, I'm always normal. I'm like in the middle. I'm like, hey, this is cool. But like my wife's like, I need to go to home show. She would love to go to those things. And so for me, and watching that, you guys do actually have a routine that's like, it relays scripture in the movement, man. It's so cool. And like what you guys do and the different things that you put out. So it's real. Like and then the presentation. Yeah. Like sometimes you don't have to preach a sermon for 2 hours and you can see these things and it reminds you, it's like, oh, there's something more to that. What are they doing there? Sometimes some of them were simple to understand. Oh yeah, of course, that's like this scene. But some of them were like, okay, like, wait, what was that one again? Like, and then you have to think and you have to put it together. And then if you don't know, let's say maybe someone from the crowd didn't know, what was that one? That's an easy point of like, yo, like, what was that one when you did this and that? And they're like, oh, that's actually the story of Moses or whatever. I don't know what it would be. But yeah, like, it's powerful, dude. And then just after, like, man, we'll get sometimes just seeing people do something inspiring altogether, because it takes so much work. It takes so much just like not just determination, but so much consistency and showing up and training and teamwork and effort. Just overall, it's not something simple. And so I think off of that already, like, people are already naturally touched and inspired by just the act of gymnastics, I'm sure. But the aspect that you put the fuel to it, the fuel behind it is actually saying you want to inspire people to know Jesus. And that adds such a powerful thing. But yeah, you don't have to go crazy out there. You've already put in some extra work on what you're already doing. And excuse me, that's enough. That's enough. It's enough for people to see it and be touched by it. So thanks. And that's amazing. Yeah, like there's so many ways we can go by this. I mean, honestly, I could probably sit in a pod and like hear about more of your stories as a missionary, and do those things. No, but I don't know. I feel like I want to go down that path. So in that, okay, no. Here's my question before that. So you tapped into the idea of like, okay, many of us grew up, I think I grew up with that same idea, like, oh, pastors or people who are in ministry only do two things. They're musicians or they're pastors. And so like, that's the only typical things that we've heard growing up. But where did that mentality shift for you? Was it through your missionary work? Was it before that? Like, where did this originate? Yeah, I think this is a good pathway to say, okay, where did you start to live by this principle? And where did it come from?
Yeah. So that is a really good segue, by the way. That's a good one. If I go all the way back, I think of growing up in that context and how, and I wonder if it was like this for you too. the first thing I ever heard, oh, you're going to be a pastor when you grow up. And it's like,
Yeah.
I'm 6. Like, what are we talking about?
I'm playing with Legos.
Exactly. And so, excuse me, I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. And it kind of makes sense within the context because that's all that you see. But it's like the more that I grew up and the more that I kept hearing this, it's also conflicting with, yeah, but I don't know if I want to do that.
Mm,
It's odd because uh, I'm actually an introvert. Nobody believes me when I say this.
I don't believe you at all.
I, there are reasons why I guess I'm better at hiding that now to a degree, but it's like getting up in front of people and just talking never appealed to me. And when we talked about like pastoral stuff, that seemed to be, and almost even to a degree in the seminary now, when people talk about pastoring, a lot of the students who come there are kind of fixated on the preaching aspect of it. Like that's the pastoring and not all the other stuff. Um, I never had the perspective of the personal connection of pastoring. It just always felt like when people said I was going to be good at it, they just meant, well, you're good at speaking publicly, so you'd be a good pastor. You know, that
Mm,
was always, it was like a one-to-one connection there. And
yeah.
because I wasn't interested in that, um, I kind of found myself getting a little bit disinterested with that and other things. But excuse me, but I was becoming very disinterested with Christianity and Adventism in general. Um, and then there's the issue of, well, if you're not trying to be a pastor, well, then are you less than, or are you um like what's wrong with you? You don't want to accept the calling kind of a thing. And so I think I think in some ways I became a little bit disillusioned with it and like, man, I don't know if I'm really trying to do this anymore. Uh, I remember going through a period where I was praying for different things to happen in my life, and it felt like a lot of those things weren't happening. So I had a real issue with the reality of God. I struggled with that a lot through high school. And it got to the point where I thought, I don't think this is real. I Going to church just became more of a habit. And eventually, once I got my license, I would show up intentionally like 5 minutes before I knew potluck was going to be happening. Come in, get the meal, and then dip right out. Like I had no interest in that.
Yeah.
But because of that, which carried over into university, and that's a whole different thing as well. It's a miracle that I graduated high school. I was not a good student. Um, but I got to the point later in my college experience where I said, man, I need to know if this is legit or not. Um, is God real or not?
Mhm.
That was like the challenge. And feeling that introvertedness kind of being a factor. And there was a girl that I had a crush on who was talking about canvassing, literature evangelism. And I was like, okay, it's an opportunity for me to go and try to spit some game here. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, the big the big question that I have is God real? So if I can be a successful canvasser, then that would prove to me, because I know I don't really like talking to people like that. And I don't know, like it seems like the exact most difficult and opposite thing to me as a person. So if I could be successful doing that, then God would have to be real. Um, and I was kind of basing that also on an experience I'd had in high school canvassing. Me and my brother and a couple friends, we convinced our parents to get us a bunch of books to sell because we thought we could make a lot of money doing that. And over the course of that summer, the four of us sold 4 books in total. It was not good. But I hated it. Like I hated getting out and going to talk to random. I hated that entire experience. But yeah, it just kind of fueled. Okay, well, if I was so bad at this, if God could make me succeed at this, then He has to be real. Was my simple, rudimentary logic, and in that summer, to keep the story short, I had an experience that I remember vividly, where it was pretty much the worst day that I'd ever had. I prayed a dumb prayer of Satan, take your best shot at me today.
Wow.
Um, yeah, I will never do that again. But but it's like from literally seeing, like, I would say demon possession. I almost got hit by a semi. I was walking on the road. I saw, I literally saw an elderly lady jump over a receptionist's desk to bar the front door to keep me from getting inside the building.
Wow.
I had dogs barking at me. Like, it was it was an insane day. I'd never had a day like it. But by the time I got to the end of that street, I was at the last person, and I had prayed, God, like, I need one book here for you to show me that you're real. I had nothing. I get down to the last business on my street, and it looks like the last person I talked to is not interested. And I happen to find one more person, and out of all the people all day, they're the first person that even seems to be remotely interested in what I'm doing. And they they're like, hold on a second. And they go back behind their counter or whatever, the register, and they come back holding one of our books, because apparently somebody else had canvassed them already. So I'm like, well, I guess that's it, because that was supposed to be my book. If I'd have sold that book, I'd have been good, but I didn't. So, and it's so weird, because I remember it felt like time slowed down, and a voice told me that book that he's holding is part of a set. And I had the other book in my bag, and I pulled it out and showed it to me, and ended up buying that book too. So that was my moment where that little, smaller than a mustard seed of faith, like, God said, okay, I can come through for you. And like, from there, I started having more questions and kind of pursuing different things about, well, how do I connect, and how do I, since this is legit, how do I relate to it, and how do I connect to it in a way that feels genuine to me? I met somebody there that summer. One of the other girls in our program couldn't stop talking about how she was going to Palau the next year as a missionary. And I remembered that a year later, when I was graduating and decided not to go into the field that I was graduating with, and ended up having no plans. And I ended up going to Palau that following year. And that kind of really got the wheels going for me on, wow, this idea of connecting with people who are different than you, where it's not always just preaching, so to speak, but it's like living with them and engaging with them on their terms. That was something, living through service, that was something that I found very appealing. And it kind of was the launch pad for my experience spiritually, and kind of getting me into a place where I said, you know what, this Christianity thing, this Adventism thing, like, it's legit, and I can rock with that.
No, it's amazing. I was like, it's so cool, because sometimes we're putting God to the test, and in our own crazy ways sometimes. But the part that, like, I've been in sales myself in the past, and for me, I don't take that lightly when you said that the guy bought a book after buying a book from somebody else. That's don't take that lightly, people. If you've never done sales, to get people winded back up to be open to buy after they just bought, like, that's hard, man. And so I don't put it towards you. It had to be God to open that up, like, because even if people feel bad, they'll still tell you shit like, hey kid, like, I already bought another book, sorry dude, like, but like, even if it's a set, like, some people are just busy with their day, so they're ready to go, like, I already gave. And if they did do I don't want to say that they did that, but even if they did do a, like, kind of just like I'm being nice buy book, there's some people, I'm sure there's people who do that. I'm sure even if it was that, he already would have exhausted that one. So to do it again for somebody else, it means that something stuck. God, I think the Holy Spirit led that and worked on that. So yeah, I just want to say I don't take that lightly. And that's cool that, because some people be like, the one sale, but yours is like, dang, I had no hope in my mind, because there was already a sale. I had to get a sale from a sale. Like,
Yeah, I didn't even think about it from that perspective. Like,
yeah.
that's that adds another layer to the story.
So yeah, no, I really love that and how that transfers in like that. I think that's one of the big connectivity points that you and I have. It's that I struggled for so long in that journey. That's I think I didn't pastor or I didn't even join my call or that mission for so long because I was like dad or mom or whoever the pastor that was trying to inspire me to do it. I'd be like, guys, like similar to you, I was like, hey, there's no place for me there. Not that I was doing crazy like bad things. It was just like I was just in a space that I was just like, don't know. I don't want to look like that X, Y, or Z. I don't that I fit that, and nor will I ever want to. I don't want to. And so, you were one where it's like, man, just like, just do it. Let's enjoy it. Let's. And for me, like especially incorporating the fishing part, I thought I was like, I don't know, maybe it's just I cared. I cared too much about what people thought. I don't know what it was. I don't remember. I don't know if you remember. I know we had one really great conversation about this kind of thing, but I just remembered that I had gotten to the point where I was like, you know, man, let's just do it. Let's just do how God has called us to be. Because I like Corey and I like Mikey. I like it's like I enjoy the lens of the gospel being lived out in your perspective. I really find it more engaging. I find it more captivating. I find it genuine. I find it real. So why not just keep living that out? Because if I see Corey acting like the template pastor, it wouldn't do anything for me because we like that. It's like this. I like to look at it as the spice cabinet, you know, right? Like we can't all be adobo, bro. Some people have to be sazon, some people have to be this salt, some people have to be pepper. I know Jesus says that we're all the salt of the earth, but that's a different analogy. But the general idea is that like we're all seasoning of some sort to the grander dish, right? And so the gospel is the main course, it's the main dish, it's everything. But how we add our little flavor to it, how God has done it through us is a powerful thing. It gives it a beautiful a way of people to receive it and enjoy it and digest it or process it, however you want to say. But so yeah, I thank you for that. You've done a lot for me. I kind of wanted to talk about, do you remember much about that conversation? Because I really think that this is the kind of thing that I want people to relationally understand. I think you have my memory always shoots me. Now I've been doing these pods. I've had some conversations, but I remember how much like it impacted me to talk to you about these things. I like to be clear, but my ADHD, my wife's like, you remember the details way too differently. So I'd rather you tell the story more so in that. So yeah, let's engage in that.
Sure. It was at Josh's house. It was some random. I can't remember if it was somebody who was leaving, which is why we were there. I think that's what it was that time.
Isai and Cindy, they were leaving.
That's right. That's right. They were heading out, and we were talking there. And I remember specifically we were talking about like making videos, and I was talking about Lego videos in particular, and how a video that I'd posted a year ago had finally gotten traction like a year later, and how surprised I was at like, man, I never would have thought, like, based on the response I got in the video on the moment, it didn't seem like there was anything there that anyone was resonating to it. But by sticking consistently, that was where I was talking about the goal of trying to record a video every day for a year, which, hold up, November 21st was when I started. So I've completed the goal.
Hey,
I've completed the goal every day for a year. But it's like, we were talking about that, and that's kind of, I was sharing with you my journey there and kind of the realization that I had of, oh, if I hadn't have started that, I wouldn't have seen the result here. And we were saying, we were talking about kind of the interest in how weird it is, the things that people like to do and if people will resonate with it or not, and how it can be discouraging if we're trying to put something out there that is important to us and valuable to us, but it feels like nobody is resonating with. And that's where I started talking about the Legos, and that's where you started talking about the fishing. And we kind of got to the point of the conversation is saying, yo, like it's worth it to do your thing, and the people who relate to it and resonate with it, they'll show up and they'll support. Like you may not see it immediately in the moment, But sticking with it over time, it's like people see, wait a second, this isn't just a gimmick. This isn't something that he's trying to do to get the views. Like, this is who he is.
Yeah.
And they vibe with that. And so that's from what I remember, that's kind of where the conversation started. And that's what it seems like that was kind of a launch pad for you. And it was also like getting me in the mindset of, to which I haven't done yet. Like, yo, man, I got to get my podcast going back again, because it was inspiring to me too.
Yeah, no, that is beautifully put, because yeah, I remember, like, man, I remembered the general inspiration that I got from it, but I don't remember the exact details of how we got there. I love that because, yeah, man, I think that, well, I remember you just got back to me because I just had my son. It'd been like a few months that my son was, so I was Mikey as a dad, way different. Like, I just got in, and then, like, I think we had gotten to a space where I was like, dude, like, because I want to make it clear, like, when we say people aren't resonating with it, I don't think we're like, I don't think that this is our goal, at least, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that our goal isn't like, oh, I just want to be affirmed from people. We just love community, and we love to be able to say what we're doing is actually putting forth inspiration, especially through the gospel, especially through connecting people to Christ. It's just a level of saying, hey, man, like, you don't got to like me or Corey per se, but can you at least, hopefully it's helping you in some way to inspire you to do the things you love to do. Inspiring you to live out the gospel in your context, in your way, in your John boat, as I like to. Yeah, that's the aspect that, like, I finally, for the first time, I think you and I just both finally got to the place where we're just like, you know what, we're just gonna keep going until
Oh,
Jesus comes, because it's like there's no other space. It's just pointless to waste your time on things that you're not meant to be doing. And to be able to say, hey, I want to inspire people with what I genuinely love. Because Jesus had his own versions of that. Like, I think his day-to-day extra in the ordinary, man, I love The Chosen. I don't know. I know they do take creative liberties, but I do, as a carpenter or as a builder, some scholars like to say he was a general builder, but I know he did carpentry. So in the aspect of, like, man, he was carving, like, one of the scenes in The Chosen where he's carving little, like, wooden toys for kids and things like that. I was like, I can imagine that he had a passion and just handiwork of just his craft, and he's just enjoying it and serving the community and building tables and building chairs or building buildings, whatever it may be. Yeah, I think that Jesus, if he was going to hop on this pod right now, I think he'd talk about the day-to-day operations. Yo, man, I hang out with fishermen all day, and I hang out with my crazy cousin John, who's paving the way. I hang out with I just think that there's an aspect of Jesus saying, I don't know, like, my day-to-day of how I connected was prayer with my father. Like, I started my mornings with deep conversation with God, and at the same time I did craftsman's work, not only in a salvific way but also in a literal sense. I did that. So yeah, I think Jesus is modeling. I think that's where we're getting it from, that he modeled that too.
100%. You mentioned something about the template pastor and how that can be a turnoff to a lot of people. And I think when you add that into the mix here, like, this is what we're saying. There's so many different ways of being a minister, and a fisherman can be a minister. A missionary can be a minister. A podcaster can be a minister, and it's all a gymnast can be a minister, and it's all going to look different. And when people get to see you being genuine and not putting on, like, the facade of trying to be this or trying to be that, that's what opens the door of connection to be able to share the gospel, as opposed to putting up a barrier of people saying, oh, this person's just putting on a show, or, oh, that person's fake. We have a lot of that in spirituality and religious spaces. And so these things are like that breath of fresh air that we need if we're going to be able to share the gospel in a more effective way.
No, I completely agree. And I think it creates a new model for discipleship, for disciple making. I know some people like that phrase of a term better. But yeah, I think that in many of churches, like, from what I see, and again, I love having someone else, because they can correct me if I'm wrong, or anyone in the comments or whatever can correct me if I'm wrong. But the general model that I see in church is that we want you to look like Christ. And so we don't take into account a lot of times your career path, your passion, so when I'm like disciple making, I don't ask them, we always talk about strengths. And I don't think we know the strength. Okay, they're a leader, but in what? Okay, they're a communicator, but in what? Because they may not be a communicator in every space. Where are they communicating effectively?
Okay.
So let's take the strength, but where is that strength coming from? Where have you developed that strength from? And how is that meaning for you in the gospel and developing you as a disciple? And I think those are the areas, like not all the disciples were fishermen. They don't all resonate with fishing. None of them like to be stinky with their hands all day. You know what I'm saying? Like that's just what it is. And that's okay. That's why he chose, like, that's why he's saying, as I'm making you a disciple, Jesus, um, how am I developing you in your area, in your craft and the things? So you go back to that space, when you go back to those places, you can share me truly effectively because you speak their language better than I ever could right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like Jesus is like, I don't always speak the lingo of a Pharisee. I don't always speak the lingo of a zealot, but I can understand you as a human, and I can transform and renew your mind and transform your perspective to be identified in Christ. So that when you go back to your spaces, that's how you're a disciple. So if you're a construction worker and you're passionate, why am I trying to make you into a typical template disciple? So then you get turned off and you're just like, man, like this is kind of not for me because it doesn't fit who I am. And so is this thing, and then you start questioning like you did. It's like, sorry, I pointed out, I just got into the heat of it, but
You're good.
but you start to wonder, you're like, is this stuff even real? Because you don't get to see Jesus act in your day-to-day real life. And the person who has some of the best tools, being a minister, being a pastor, we have the tools, we have the biblical understanding, and we're not letting it contextualize. We contextualize for sermon preaching, but we don't always contextualize for disciple making. And that's the danger. And I think Jesus wants us to find, hey, you're a florist? Yo, how can we make you a disciple as a florist?
Yeah.
Yo, you're a some people in the church might not like this, but you're a salsa dancer professionally. How are you a salsa dancer? I got a friend I grew up with that is in the NFL, and I hope, hey, if you're watching this, brother, I don't want to put names out there yet, but if you're watching this and you can be on the pod, that'd be great. But even him, I know he has on his Instagram Bible verses and things. And some people, within our church space are like, oh, sports and all that. But he wants to be a disciple of Jesus. So why would I limit that? Because the convictions are going to come later. So anyway, I'm in the preaching mode right now. But what's your thoughts on this? What's
Nah, man, you're speaking at hot fire right now, honestly, because there's so much there. I hear you saying that, and I'm thinking of some of the research that I'm going to be doing for my dissertation project. Um, it's going to be exploring an aspect of this. When you look at our universities and how they're kind of operated now compared to how they were operated at inception, a lot of these schools were mission schools. So they were actually adopting the mentality of ultimately you're coming here to gain a skill set to share the gospel, but you might do it as an architect. You might do it as an engineer. You might do it as a nurse. You might do it as a mathematician, but it's still a mission school. So you're going to get these tools and you're going to be very comfortable in sharing these abilities in this space. But now most of the schools have shifted from that mentality. And it's like, okay, you're going to come here and be an accountant. We'll try to make sure you're a good Christian too, but you're going to go be an accountant.
Hmm.
And it's different. It's
Yeah.
different. So what it ends up doing is, to use that word template, it makes the Christian experience a template one that everyone's trying to match to look the same, even though they're all going into different fields. And it doesn't work because people aren't able to see, well, how does this connect with my real day-to-day experience? How does this connect with the life I'm going to be living? And how does ministry look in my context? So once we try to carbon copy the Christian experience of it, people end up, and this is exactly what we're seeing for a lot of young people, the last time that they have religious experiences when they're in university. They leave, they go into the workplace, and they leave the spirituality behind because it wasn't connected with what they were doing. So there's a gap in, there's a gap in the education system that used to be filled.
Yep.
As for the reason why it's gone away from that, I'm not sure. That's what I plan to research and find out. But it's like there's there are holes there where people are feeling like, well, as a gymnast at Andrews University, my spiritual experience doesn't look like the person who's on stage, part of the praise team singing, who's going to be a theology student all the time. So that's not for me. And since I don't fit in that group, maybe I don't fit in spirituality. That's kind of how people are looking at it now. And if they're not a part of those things that are part of the carbon copy that everybody that has the spiritual moniker is doing, then there's nothing there for me. We're not connecting it to the things that people are doing on an individual basis. And Andrews in particular has a huge opportunity with that, because one of the things that the university likes to hang its hat on is how diverse of degrees and how many different programs they offer. Well, that only goes as far as how many different ways are we looking to show that people can share the gospel in all these different fields. Otherwise, it's just another degree for another degree, and I can go get that at any other school. There's nothing that sets it apart. So within Adventist universities, I think I never like saying we need to go back to doing things a certain way, because I don't think that's good. But it's something that we need to think about. How can we better incorporate those aspects of, yeah, somebody's going to be an architect, but how can they be, how can they share the gospel in that space? What are the aspects of the gospel that apply more to them in that space than they would to a nurse in their space?
Yeah. I love what you said there. Two phrases, but the first one that I want to is when you're saying there, like, the carbon copy Christian. That's cool. I definitely want to remember that phrasing. Like, yeah, like we don't want to carbon copy people. And the second phrase, man, you just said it there. Man, I lost it. But the second phrase was, it was, if it comes back, I'll share it. But yeah, it's the carbon copy Christian thing. Yeah, it's huge. It's something that we're losing people because of that. I mean, there's an aspect, I mean, we almost got lost ourselves in it. We're just like, well, because there's an aspect of like, it's not all just about me, me, me. We know it's about Christ. But I think there's an aspect that a lot of people could benefit from, is to knowing that Jesus actually, I know we hear Jesus loves you, but I want people to understand that he actually likes you too. Like, he just likes hanging out with you. He likes being with you, especially as a new creation in Christ, especially if you gave your life to him. Like, you shouldn't have any shame or fee, unless you're walking in the things you should be walking in. But hey, there's still hope and grace in that as well, that God can still transform our lives in that too. But what I'm saying is, you're walking in the healthy space, you're walking with Christ, you shouldn't be ashamed of having certain passions. I mean, he loved the children. Children did not just, when they ran up to him, they didn't like morph into the Pharisee, and then they're like, we're talking to you in some like scholarly terms. They didn't do that. He loved them for being the childlike nature of enjoying. I think it's like, because as we get older, it's almost like that Peter Pan effect, right? Like, as they say, like, you grow up and just become this, like, you lose the awe and the wonder and the joy that comes with being a child. And so, yeah, that's what we're saying. It's like, find the things that give you that childlike just joy and inspiration. And Christ wants that for you. I genuinely can boldly say that. But yeah, so thank you for sharing that. And I hope when we get to the research, man, like, I'd love to read that and get to know more about that.
Sure.
Another component, and I think now we can shift, because we've talked a little bit about ideas and mentalities, but let's get into our faith experiences and our theology. I have a segment here called Fishy Faith. And so what that is, again, if this is the first time you're watching this, Fishy Faith is I like to make an analogy of saying the same way when we go eat out at a restaurant and fish is prepared, or you're going to a sushi place or whatever it may be, and these people who are trained supposedly, right? They cook for you, and let's say the fish wasn't prepared properly, bad stuff happens, right? Like if the fish was poorly prepared, or it was just rotten and they didn't check properly, whatever it may be, it creates poisonous features to our health. The same way I believe that the same way that um, institutions, religions prepare and serve their version of theology, it to the spiritual health of those, if it's not prepared properly or actually rooted in the heart of Christ and rooted in what their healthy theology. Sometimes we can be poisoned spiritually as well. We can be hurt. We can be sick. We can make other people sick as well, right? So again, ground rules to this section. This is not about hurting a denomination, calling anybody out. This is about creating healthy models of how to learn and grow in a healthy space and share your faith in a healthy and beautiful way as Christ would want it. And again, I encourage you guys, if you've been hurt by how one chef, as you would say, as one preparer has hurt, we're sorry. We're sorry that that's been your situation. But you don't have to give up on the meal itself, the gospel. You don't have to give up on that, because there's other places and spaces that are hopefully sharing a healthy presentation, a healthy way of living, and a healthy way of processing that information. So yeah, Fishy Faith, what has that been for you? Anything that you've had experience in your life with that? And then how did you find a healthy way of getting to it? Or how did you find a healthy way in living despite that?
Yeah. That, man, there are definitely a lot of different directions I think I could go with this, but the biggest one to me is, and I'll say this first to kind of preface it. The reason that I am an Adventist is because I believe that as a system of truth, it's the most complete one out there for the purposes of leading and guiding and orienting people towards Jesus and salvation. So with that being said, though, I think that a tendency that we can see within our faith is almost a kind of arrogance to where, because I believe I'm right, being right is the only thing that matters. So I'm only going to engage with people in the sense of I'm right and you're wrong, and I want to change the way that you think by giving you all the facts as to why you're wrong and why I'm right. And that's regardless of the approach. That's without any consideration of who the person is I'm talking to, what their religious background is, what their physiological, mental, social, any of that background is. It's just about me being right. And because I see something that looks wrong from my perspective, so I'm going to call you out on it, that kind of a thing. I think, and I guess to kind of sum that up, the approach, because someone is right, it just means as long as I'm telling you I'm good and I'm doing my part, and it's totally irrespective of the approach that could be beneficial. So that perspective there, I struggled with that a lot growing up, because obviously if you feel like you are right, you do want people to know something that you believe to be right. But the bigger question is, how are you sharing this? And there was always a question where, in my early stages of kind of changing my mindset on this, I was challenged because people were saying, well, no, if you change the approach, you're changing the gospel. I would hear that often. So it's like, it's the straight truth, the present truth and all this. And if you say it any different, or if you start talking about God's love, or if you try to soften it up a little bit, now you're changing the gospel and it isn't the hard truth anymore. I would hear things like this, and I really struggled with that. And it all comes back down to approach. The thing that changed my mind on this and made me convinced that approach is more important than the truth to an extent was an experience I had in Palau. I went that first year. That was 2010. I came back after that year and did some other jobs, mostly canvassing programs. And then I went back in 2015. And this time when I went, I was the Bible teacher and the chaplain for the high school. Um, I spent a lot of time getting my lesson plans together, figuring out I want to teach this at this point for this class. I was teaching all four, the freshmen through the seniors. I had all my stuff completely organized. It looked like a master plan, and it was so nicely detailed and put together that my lesson plan ended up being used as a display for incoming teachers over the next few years of how to do your lesson plans. It was that airtight. but but it was based on an assumption that I had that my approach was right. I went into class, and for the first month I struggled because I'm looking at the students, and being in Palau, the mission school there, I literally have students representative of a number of countries. We had students from China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Korea, Philippines, other islands, Australia, New Zealand, India, Bangladesh. We had students from everywhere. And with that comes several different religious backgrounds and just life experiences. You can't even imagine the differences that are coming all into your freshman classroom, you know? And here I am from my American background and context and my spiritual background, and thinking, this is the way that I'm going to share these stories with these people. This is the way that I'm going to share the truth with these students. And it was not hitting. It wasn't resonating at all. Half the class is asleep. Nobody wants to pay attention. And for a while starting out, my mentality was, well, they just don't want the truth. So it just is what it is. I'm going to keep on doing me. And that mentality came from how I'd grown up and kind of, I guess, experienced it being like, this is the right way. This is what it is. And as long as I'm putting it out there, I'm doing my part. One experience in class I had, it was like a month and a half into the school year, totally changed my view on this. I was talking about David, my favorite Bible character. David and Goliath seems like the most common of stories. The littlest of kids know it. Everybody knows the story. And I'm talking about David. And one of my students in the front of the class, he raised his hand and he asked me, who is David? And in the moment, I remember thinking, is this kid trolling? Because everybody knows who David is. But there was something else that came in and said, wait a second. If he doesn't know, then there's no way that I can continue to approach these kids from my mentality. That's what it exposed to me. I was making an assumption that they understood and viewed everything and had the same background as me, so they would be able to connect with the information the same way that I was because of that. And once he asked that question, I'm like, wait a second, this is not true at all.
Well,
so I scrapped my lesson plans. I went back to the drawing board and I had to slow it down. I ended up putting two things on the board that my dad had always told me growing up. I never forgot. Always ask questions and always look to Jesus. And so I opened the classroom and made it a space where people could ask questions. And any question, I would stop and we would deal with it, and we would take as long as it took until they felt like they understood. And it was only when I did this that the students would tell me later that their previous Bible teacher was very much like what I was doing, except a little harsher that first month of school, to where it was like, this is what it is. And he would go out of his way actually calling people out for stuff. Like, not good. But they were scared to ask the questions sometimes because they felt like it was coming at them like this. And so opening up, they thought I was joking. They thought I was the one trolling when I said, you can ask any question you want to, because that wasn't an experience they'd had in a Bible class before, which the more I started thinking about it, I was like, dude, that's crazy. But I was doing the same thing. It was just, this is what it is. But for all those plans that I had for my lesson plans, I think I only made it through 1/4's worth, 1/4.5 top worth of content that I had planned out for the entire year. We did maybe 30% of that, because that's how long it took to go through stuff, asking questions so they could understand. But when they had that ability And when I said, let me find out where these students are from, well, two things. Once I started doing that, the students were engaged because now they were able to get an understanding and feel like they were actually learning, and they could find out things to connect it to where they were coming from. The other thing that I did when I stopped spending so much time on my lesson plans was spending more time with the students to learn about them and their backgrounds. Because the thing about their different religions and different cultural contexts, I didn't come into the year thinking that. That's a recognition that I had, excuse me, after I started asking the question. And so being able to learn more about them, it's like, wait a second. We've always heard that, well, the gospel is for everyone and Jesus is trying to go ye therefore, teach all nations, all this kind of stuff. And what I realized by getting to know my students better is that the gospel and the story of Jesus doesn't sound exactly the same to everyone, but there's an aspect of it that can connect with everyone.
Wow.
And it was like, wait a second. So this is the piece that that person might need. And that's the piece that that person might need. I can't just do like a word dump, like what I had been doing and say, I've done my part. You didn't accept it. That's on you. Because I wasn't even speaking their language. But once I started getting to know them, I realized it isn't about, let me throw all of this at them, but it's that one thing that they can connect with. And it was so cool because over the course of the years, a lot of those students that I started with in that freshman class and was with them for the next 4 years, I was with them for their entire high school experience there in Palau. A number of them ended up getting baptized, and I still have a lot of good relationships with them to this day. And I'm not saying that baptism was the goal, but I think more so the relationship to where it's like these young people felt like they had some ownership of their own experience, and they felt like it was something they could connect to because I took the time to get to know them more instead of just hawking at them.
Yep.
And it made all the difference in my experience there. And oddly enough, it made teaching more fun for me. So it was a benefit to them and it was a benefit for me. And it's funny because when I think of how those lesson plans ended up being used over the next couple of years as like, this is how you do it. I'm sitting there thinking to myself like, yeah, but I'm definitely not doing that anymore.
Yeah. Something that can be good in theory, right? Like it's good in theory, but not always contextual, not always what it needs to be. And so you were contextualizing, Paul, it's like I was talking to a friend last night, like we always get like, I don't want to say I'd say the traditional crowd. I don't want to say older or younger, but the traditional crowd will always say like, if you quote too many like movies and stuff of like modern day, they'll be like, man, we need to stick to the Bible and never use like any other books or quote any other people other than Auntie Ellen. But here nor there. But the aspect is that if you really study Paul in the New Testament, he's quoting, like he's reusing a lot of the ideas of philosophers and people, great thinkers of that day, so they can understand the language of what he's talking about with the gospel.
Yes.
And so yeah, I mean, it's what you're doing. It's what you had to do when you travel to a new place. You have to say, okay, what can I understand about them that can resonate? How can I learn to understand them so I can know what part of the gospel can hit them the hardest in a good way, and in case they can show me new nuances of the gospel that you didn't see before, because now you're seeing it through a new lens, and now you're saying, wow, the gospel is profound anywhere. So that's a deep, I don't take that lightly. I'd love to continue, and whenever I go in ministry to take on that same heart. That's a great way of producing healthy theology, right? Like healthy experiences, because it's saying, hey, I value and resonate, or at least I try to value and resonate with your story. I may not take everything. That doesn't make it wrong, but I take what I can and grow from it and learn from it. Whereas that's what they're doing with you, and building that relational trust. Sometimes, yeah, like the spaces of like, but that's the other thing. Template. What did you say? Carbon copy Christianity. Is that what you said? Yeah.
Yeah.
Templated Christianity or carbon copy Christianity, whatever you want to call it. that's that again. I think that is the big fishy theology that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Whenever we want to make clones, whenever we want to make everything streamlined, like we're living in Michigan, like it all can't be the Ford Model T era. Like we can't have a conveyor belt of Christian. It's just boop, 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 boop. That's not how it goes.
Yeah.
It's very personal. It's very personal and very deep. Like the gospel has to be experienced in community, the community that understands individuals and gets to know people in a profound way. I mean, Jesus did not stop them from being like, he wanted their identity to be in him, but their context was still there. He's like, I'm not changing your context. The kingdom is here, but you are bringing the kingdom to your context.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
You are bringing the kingdom to your context. Your allegiance is no longer to your context. You are not valued or determined by your context. You're valued because you belong to me as your Lord, King, and Savior. But I want you to show them what I've shown you and take it back home with you. It's like when people like give you a sample, but except this is like a lifelong sample. It's like this, and take one home for the kids, and take one home for the. Jesus is like, take this back home to whoever you need to take it to, because I want them all. And one day, what you see as a reality in your experience in the interconnectivity of the gospel, by your own individual experiences, you'll see the beautiful nuances, the diversity of the kingdom of God. When you finally see it happen and come to pass, when this world that can't somehow relate to differences, in this world that can't think anything beyond of our own selfish ambitions, Jesus is saying, you'll realize the greatest part of the gospel is that it's shared and that it's lived in community completely.
Yes.
Not just when like a forced community, because sometimes, man, the church can feel like walk in, you sound like this, talk like this, be like this, and it's like, I don't know, like, and then we have this belief of like, yeah, other denominations are going to be there for sure, and it's like, yeah, but why don't you connect with them now? If they're going to be there for sure anyways, why not get started right now? Why not say, hey, brother, I'm going to see you in heaven. Teach me some nuances of the gospel that I may not know. And if you don't mind, can I share some elements of my life and my perspective and my worldview? Because my world was rocked when I met Jesus. And so, yeah, man, we're preaching gospel here now, brother. But yeah, it's like, why do we have to wait for the reality of Jesus' kingdom to be here in order to know, like, in order for it to be real? It's like, no, it's real already. He came, he died, he rose again, he's in heaven, and he's interceding on our behalf. But in that space, he's saying, man, like the kingdom is alive in them. The kingdom that's going to physically, it's the now and the not yet, right? That's the main thing that we theology. There's this now aspect of like, yeah, like there's still problems, there's still sin, there's still things in the world, but you can still partake in the real reality that's going to be completely, fully realized in the end with Jesus. But you can partake of that now and still show people, like, that's the great hope. That's the great hope that they see it now. They see the kingdom. When it'll just be the beautiful, like, finalization. Oh, this is what I've been living inside. Now I get to see the full blast of what that really looks like, the full capacity, the full everything of it in its fullness. But it's not going to be too foreign. It's going to be like, wow, like I had the demo version on Earth, but now I got the full CD. Like I got the full PlayStation 2. You know what I'm saying? Like I got the full, back then the video games would give you the demos, right? Like Jesus has given us the most long-term demo possible, and he wants us to burn out that CD with everybody in our own way. Because, bro, if video game styles anything, a lot of people take them differently. Some people like certain things about the game, and it's the same game, but there's different reasons why we like that game, and there's different starting points and end points as to what we focus on. See, he's got the sticks right now. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, we can go all day on that. But thank you, man. Like, that really resonated with me. I think that's just the healthy approach. It's not always about being right. It's about knowing where you are right now.
Mm-hmm.
And where you are right now, that's what's right. God has put you in the right place. God has put you in the right time, in the right context to share his love. And that's where you can say, oh man, this is the only thing that I know 100% that's right. That I'm here to learn and grow with someone else and be transformed by Jesus. That's what's right. So if you want to talk about what's right and who's right and what's wrong is when we isolate ourselves. What's wrong is
Yeah.
when we never want to learn anything else. So yeah, what do you got?
Yeah, real quick to illustrate that, I got to give my dad a shout out. I was hanging out down there with my family last week, and he was telling me about an experience, and we talk a little bit about he. It's really cool hearing him being older talk about how his mentality is changing, because it is rare for older and more traditional to change the way that they view things. So it's really cool to hear him talking about it. But he was saying how he was in their church's parking lot. It was one Sabbath afternoon after church. He was there with a couple of church members, and somebody from a different church drives up, and they're handing out flyers for their vacation Bible school. And my dad was saying it was interesting watching the reaction of the Adventist couple that was with him, because they took it, and right after the people left, they crumpled it up and threw it in the trash and expressed like, what can we learn from them? And it's like, that's the problem right there, because the theology doesn't match. To your point, you're speaking gospel, bro. It doesn't make any sense to say, oh, we'll all be in heaven and other sheep I not of this fold, but I can't learn anything from you now. Those two things are not in harmony. They're not in
Wow.
harmony at all. And when we approach, just think about what that does for the community. We're not going to connect. We can't learn anything from you now. So there's no bridges being built. What does that do? It's funny because people will say there's nothing I can learn from you, but what they're really doing is shutting down the bridge for me to be able to teach you. So
Mhm.
it's like, and for people to not see that, because, and maybe they're not even looking at it from that perspective, because honestly, even saying something like that is really almost suggesting that we don't want to have any engagement with you at all, which is maybe where they're really at.
Wow.
But again, that doesn't match with the theology and what we're saying we're about. So there's problems with that on so many different levels. But that's the kind of mentality that we see, and because it doesn't match, we got to get consistent with that, because people can see that. And what does that do for the larger? I mean, you know how it is. They say one bad apple spoils the bunch. That person who came into that parking lot may say, oh, well, this is the interaction I had with these Adventists, so I don't want anything to do with Adventists anymore.
Yep. Yep. I man, I'm just yeah, exactly. Like, that's exactly it. I mean, you just shared, yeah, I think there's a lot of things in that story and in what we've just talked about that, like, yeah, if we just focus on just that little thing to work on right now, that's a big chunk
It's
of
a lot.
that's a big thing to work on right now. So yeah, I hope guys you've been inspired by that. If you've been in that, we're sorry that that's something that if you've been hurt by. I just always want to give that disclaimer. I'm sorry to those. I mean, it wasn't us. I'm sorry, but I do know that there's better, healthier methods out there, and hopefully you've learned from Corey here. Hopefully you've learned from this story, because there is a better path that Christ has put us on. And so yeah, don't give up. There's still hope. And that segues me into the last segment. What is your last? If you have just one last thing, I don't like to say like this is your last. Like I don't like to sound like that, but um, if one last thing to share with the audience, of just empowering them, inspiring them, what's the one thing you want to leave them with, and then also can you give people of where to find you, and where to like where they can connect after this, because I don't like to leave it just about connecting with us. I want, if they loved it, resonated with what you're saying today, hey, connect with Corey, please. So yeah, so those two things, last word, and then where they can connect with you with.
Yeah, I would say everyone has these different passions, and you have them for a reason. If we believe that um, because God made us, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, it means that God had some influence and input on the things that interest you. So it's kind of weird if you have these interests, but then you have people who are also saying God made you, so you need to be like this instead. So like, did he make me this way or not? Like which one is it? So I think for people, if you're out there and you have these different interests, like it could be fitness, it could be sports, it could be the salsa dancing, it could be fishing, it could be gymnastics, it could be Lego, it could be anything really. But you have that interest for a reason. And there are people in those spaces who may not ever connect with someone who's connected to Jesus because of how we've treated those spaces. So I think that's something that we have to flip. And what I would encourage you to do is not just to go into that area of interest, reckless abandon, and say, all right, all out, this is just what I'm going to do. But go into that space and realize that Jesus can be with you in that space, and that by connecting with people in that space, it may open the doors to connect. I'm not saying you got to go force it, and I'm not saying you go into those spaces like waving your flag and saying, here's who I am and this is what I'm about. Like, this is what I'm really about. You don't have to do all of that. All I'm saying is, don't feel like you have to be in a box and that there's only one way to share the gospel and to be a good Christian. You can be a good Christian as a Lego enthusiast, as a scuba diver, as a fisherman, as all of these things. You can do that, and God will make the space for that because he made you that way. So take advantage of that opportunity, connect with the people in your space that others would never have a chance to connect with, and feel empowered that as long as you're being yourself, whether it's in your interests or in your Christianity, people will see the authenticity and they'll resonate with that, and you'll be able to connect with people because of that. Don't ever feel like because you're not doing something a certain way that it's necessarily wrong or not good Christian, or you're not doing enough. Like, please don't feel that way, because again, if God made you the way that you are, you're that way for a reason. And it's a way that he can use you to accomplish something for him that nobody else could. That's the beauty of us all being individuals and not carbon copies of each other. So take that to heart and let that be an inspiration for you as you go through your own very unique and different Christian experiences.
Yeah, I love that. It's beautiful, man. Thank you for sharing that aspect. It's you saying, "Follow me as I follow Christ." Is very much Paul-esque. It's like you don't have to be Paul. He's like, just follow Jesus with me, and I'll go on a journey with you. That's powerful. So yeah, last thing was, where can they find you? How can they connect with you? Because I want that. I mean, unless you don't want that. I'm sorry, I didn't even ask you.
No. By all means, we out here, it's all about making new connections. So I'm down with that for sure. Unfortunately, I say unfortunately because both of my handles right now have my Palau name in it. So I'm gonna spell it for you because it may not make sense if I just say it. But the Instagram is Ngoriakl_CJ. And that's NGORIIAKL_CJ. You can find me there, and you'll be able to see a lot of gymnastic stuff, some of the inspiration stuff, consistency, discipline, and you'll see a bunch of random stuff there, but hopefully it's inspiring. And then YouTube is Ngori Stories. So that's NGORII_S and stories. And that's also what the podcast is named too. I tried to match them both up so it's easier to find. And that should be on Spotify and where you listen to podcasts and stuff. There are a bunch of podcasts already uploaded. There's a lot of videos already uploaded, but I hope to be doing more stuff like this because I even for being an introvert, I love this. I love engaging like this. It's so much fun. So I have to get back into it because it brings so much life, man.
I give you
that's where you can find it.
Awesome. Thank you. I just want to say I gave you a hard time, but I'm also an extroverted introvert. So I don't recharge with people. I get inspiration of that and the thing, but I don't. So it's very funny that I was like giving you, but I'm very similar. So man, thank you so much, Corey, for jumping on the pod. I know that I got to get you again because it seems like we could go like forever. And that's amazing. I could go on forever, but definitely the viewer needs to get a little break in between. So I think this has been beautiful. It's been a wonderful conversation, and thank you again for always being authentic, real, and just inspiring to me, man. I thank you. This pod, you've been an inspiration to this pod, that you helped me and empower me to go and do it, and I did it, and we're here. Hopefully more than just 7 episodes, right? I want to keep going. And so, yeah, I want to thank you, and I want to thank every single person that's been listening, been along for the journey. And if this is your first time, thanks again. Give a like, comment, share, subscribe, all the cool stuff. I just want to connect and build community, guys. So please, yeah, if you got comments, concerns, if you didn't, something you don't understand or don't agree with, that's okay too. We want to chat, we want to talk. We just want to grow with each other and get to know Christ in a deeper way. So yeah, guys, thanks again for listening, and stay tuned for the next episode. Yeah, we're on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Apple. I don't like to say, what is it? Apple Podcasts. There we go. Apple Podcasts, and yeah, and on social media.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, is it iTunes? Is it Apple Music? Is it, what is this? Apple Podcast. So, guys, thanks again. Corey, thank you again, and man, everybody, stay blessed, and just, man, have a wonderful day and the rest of your time. Corey, thanks again. Much love, brother.
Thank you.